Welcome, and thank you all for attending our panel, Shifting from Micromanagement to Accountability. My name is Anna Molosky, and I'm your moderator. I am so excited to be here today, surrounded by my fellow thought leaders and so many amazing women and allies. It's great to finally be able to put a face on all those LinkedIn profiles. On my way here today, I was listening to The Economist and heard some pretty fascinating stats. 70% of employees said that their manager influenced their mental well-being just as much or more than their significant other. Furthermore, 1/2 of Americans who leave a job do so not because of the salary, not because of the commute, but because they have a micromanager. And that is why this topic is so crucial and timely to this conference and our lives. Now, without further ado, let's meet our esteemed speakers.
I'm Natalia Dmitrieva. I'm a global head of data content at Schoenfeld. I joined Schoenfeld about a year ago with the goal to bring more data and more content to the company and offer data and content to our portfolio managers in the most effective and efficient way. And previously, I was at Two Sigma for 17 years and changed my career a year ago.
Hi, I'm Kira O'Sullivan, Director of People at Built Rewards. We're a 120-person New York City-based startup. We're a rewards and loyalty program for renters to allow you to earn points on rent and in your local neighborhood spend, all while building credit and eventually a path to homeownership.
Hi, I'm Monica Malhotra. I'm Executive Vice President at a technology company called Clever Devices. No, we're not that clever, though, besides the name. We provide technology for transit industry. People think, buses and trains are these pieces of metal. There's a lot of technology that goes in those, just like it goes in our cars. So that's me.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bhavya. I work for Bloomberg. I'm an engineering team leader. And as I admitted on the stage 30 minutes ago, I have been a micromanager in my life. So I'm glad to be a part of this panel today.
Hi, my name is Erica Dean. I work for Robin as the Chief Security Officer. And our firm is a financial that serves brokerage as well as cryptocurrency and our card companies.
Hi, my name is Reba Mathin. I'm a product leader with a decade of experiences launching products in the B2C as well as B2B financial markets. Started my career working for institutional financial firms and moved over to startup world few years ago. I have been managing teams for almost a decade now, and I'm really excited to bring my perspective here for shifting more to accountability.
All right, thank you, everyone. So we have our first question for Natalia. How do you define and identify micromanagement?
Right. So I will start with definition provided by Gartner. Gartner defines micromanagement as a pattern of manager behavior marked by excessive supervision and control on people's work and processes, and limited delegation of the decision-making or tasks to people they work with. People micromanage and managers micromanage for all different reasons. Some reasons could be just obsessive need to control and to supervise. Some because of the insecurity. Some because they are not experienced managers, or there could be something that's going on in their lives. But mostly often it happens because managers don't trust in and respect in people they work with. And that's probably the first thing that needs to be addressed when the micromanagement behavior is observed. So what could be an indication of micromanagement? First is a lack of delegation. Yeah, as I mentioned, the people don't trust that the task could be done well, and how the task will be done is aligned with the manager's vision. So the managers don't trust anyone to do the job and to do the task and do everything by themselves. Of course, managers are not superheroes, and they should trust people who are within their teams because they were hired with specific skills and specialties, and they should entrust those people to do those jobs. Another sign of the micromanagement is being overly involved in people's work. So standing over someone's shoulders and watching every step of the job, of the task, is really freezes up people and kills the creativity. So being extremely prescriptive on how the task should be done, what exactly should be done, how, up to every single point, this is definitely leaves very little room for creativity. And Steve Jobs once mentioned that it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire highly qualified people so they could tell us what to do and how to do things. Another sign of the micromanagement is a request for lots of reports, overly reporting, and need to be informed about every single thing, every single task, every single conversation that are happening within the team. So this is obsession with information gathering. It most likely comes with insecurity. Micromanagers do really afraid that some decisions will be made on behind of their backs. So that's kind of a framework that we could define how we can define the micromanagement.
Thank you, Natalia. So we're moving from the definition to now real-life examples of micromanagement. So we'll go to Erica, and then Reba. So please share a time when you were micromanaged as an employee, either were micromanaged as an employee or were a micromanager yourself. And how did it impact you, your work, and how did you overcome the situation? I will kick us off. Interestingly enough, I have been a micromanager and I have been micromanaged, but I'm going to share a story about me micromanaging. Early on in my leadership career, I had just transitioned from being an individual contributor to a manager. And I think I hadn't quite grasped the concept of letting go of control and delegation. So I did assign work to other people. But what would happen is I would follow up with them constantly, pretty much every day. And I would ask them what they're doing. I would question almost every decision. And then one day, one of my people came up to me and they said, you're micromanaging and this is how it's making me feel. And that was so impactful that person had enough courage to come to me and say, you're basically making it so that I feel like I can't be empowered to do my job. And you're actually causing more work for yourself. And so at the end of the day, you're actually not getting the value out of the rest of this team because you're trying to do your job and our job. And that just clicked and held with me for the rest of my career. And so to me, that is really, really why you wouldn't want to micromanage, right? It doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't help you. It actually makes it worse. It causes downstream impacts on both morale as well as productivity. So it ended up slowing down a lot of our work because I was causing a lot of stoppage instead of actually helping to support the team that I was actually in charge of. And so that was a pretty impactful example for me.
Yeah. Before we got on stage, all of us were talking about how at some point we were all micromanagers. If you're a type A personality, you always want to be in control, know everything that's going on. So you learn, and if you have teams that actually come and tell you that what's actually happening, it's really helpful for you to be a better manager. I was actually micromanaged, and want to go through that. I was very fortunate. I've had really good managers. I was micromanaged earlier in my career, and essentially the way I sort of overcame that was have an open communication with my manager who was micromanaging me, and really just sought out like a time where we could talk through sort of what was really going on and how it was impacting my productivity and creativity generally. And so had an open conversation, really non-confrontational, telling him exactly how things were happening, how things were moving. And really that helped to sort of set some sort of baselines in terms of like how my autonomy was not increasing. There was a lack of trust. And then as part of that conversation, we were able to set up some like guidelines of how, I can provide more updates. Eventually what happened was like in 2-3 weeks, like I was able to give regular updates, and it really created a level of trust. And it provided more autonomy for me to be able to go with more ideas, better outcomes. And so really helped me to sort of like move forward. So I'd really, I think if you feel like you are being micromanaged, the first thing I would say is try to have an open conversation with your manager.
Great. 2 wonderful examples. Now, Monica, how have you seen micromanagement impact your team or your organization?
It's a very good question. But before I answer that, I'm going to say micromanagement cannot be taken away. It can be reduced, but it cannot be taken away. And we have to understand that. And the reason I say that is because it's always about why it's happening. Is it a new manager, right? We've all been there. Is it a reason that the manager has some kind of a pressure or some kind of a reporting that you as an employee may not know? I as an employee may not know, right? So that's important to understand why it's happening, and then have the conversation with your manager saying, let's talk about it, how it affects me. To answer the question, how have I seen it? It definitely comes with a lot of frustration. Actually, right here in the conference, I had a call with one of my colleagues, and I had to say, let's set the targets and not worry about how it's going to be achieved. And that was, it just could not have been better on the day when we were talking about this, right? It's a C-level colleague in my company, and I'm still having this conversation. So it just frustrates people. It frustrated me in that conversation. So it's a constant reminder to yourself as well not to do it for your team members. Trust takes time, right? Trust takes time. It's a two-way street. It is not just the manager trusting the employees, but it's also the employees trusting the manager. But open communication is the only way, right? It's okay if you have that trust. It's okay to say, let's talk about why it's not happening. And even if it is not just data-driven and it's emotion, right? That event of that particular micromanagement triggered in something in you that suddenly, your behavior changes, your tone changes, your body language changes. So just have that conversation, right? It's a work in progress. We're never going to achieve perfection, and that's okay, right? Also understanding yourself, whether again as an employee or a manager, is important, right? Why? Like ask that question 3 times for yourself and your manager, then have the conversation. Thank you.
Great answer. Really, really resounds with me about the open communication. So next, for Flavia, as a manager, what kind of tools or methodologies or
other things do you employ to encourage accountability and ownership amongst your direct reports?
Yeah, of course. I would resonate with the sentiment here that micromanagement cannot be completely avoided. If you're someone who likes to keep their shit together, you're likely to turn into a micromanager at some point in your career. But you need to be mindful and you need to work on a strategy so it doesn't happen in a way that your team is feeling that they just don't have any freedom to grow or be creative. So I have a 5-pointer strategy, right? The first thing that I would do is make sure I always share the vision. Every time I'm assigning someone a task, it's important they know why this task is important. Because unless they resonate with the vision, you cannot expect them to be accountable. They need to know the importance. They need to be the reason for the value of this task or assignment. The second strategy is to let them have their own plan. So share the why, don't tell them the how. Let them create their own plan. Everyone likes to own their plan. If it's your idea, you like to be accountable, you want to do better, you're motivated. So that's the second piece. And if they're doing well, tell them, appreciate. Appreciation leads to accountability. If your employees get that feedback that, oh, I did really well, my manager appreciated that I delivered that project on time, they're more likely to feel that accountability the next time this happens. But on the flip side, if things do not work out, take the blame. If you're the leader and you assigned a task to a team member, and let's say, there were reasons and it was not delivered, don't put them in front of the panel and say, like, this is the person responsible, because that will 100% demotivate everyone in your team and they would not feel accountability. They would want to run away from being accountable. So give appreciation, but take the blame. And the last thing, which is very important, which we heard here as well, is seek feedback. Create that space, create that culture in your team where your people, your team members feel comfortable to come and tell you when they feel the pressure, when they feel that you're being overly controlling, when you're micromanaging them. One good way to do this is every time I get out of a one-on-one, I make a mental note of what was the duration that I was speaking for and what was the duration that my team member was speaking for. And if it's that majority of the time you're the one doing the talking, I don't think things are working very well. So check on that. See if your team member is speaking out their mind, if you're giving them, if they feel that comfort. And if you follow these 5 things, I think if you are being a micromanager yourself, you'll figure it out, you'll stop yourself from doing that, and you will develop that accountability in your team naturally.
Thank you. That was some really great advice that we can all put into practice. Kiara, for our next question, what benefits have you observed when an organization does have that culture of accountability and ownership? And likewise, how does the culture affect accountability?
Yeah. So I love this question because I think it ties together very nicely the points that honestly have been brought up until now. The first thing is you have to have trust, open communication, and frankly, accountability across the business. If you don't trust the people that you're bringing in, there's probably something wrong in your recruiting process, and you should probably talk to your HR people team. If you're not trusting that the right questions are being asked during that interview process, that the person next to you is holding their part of the business accountable, then this just isn't going to work. And that will therefore create kind of a whole spiral of micromanagement from beginning to end of a person's career with you. I think the second part of that is there has to be alignment across the top. Our leadership at Built has really created this kind of whole mentality of ownership, and that from the most senior to the most junior CX team member, you own what you do here. You are the expert in that thing, whether it's answering tickets or building our next product launch. You're the person who owns that thing. You see it from beginning to end, and you're the person responsible for making sure that you have the resources you need, be that people, vendors, what have you, to make that happen. In environments where there's a culture like this, frankly, and the one that I work in, it's a beautiful place to work. And it's somewhere where, frankly, we want to be in office and we want to be around each other, which I know is maybe a hot topic. Anyone who's come to our booth, we're in office between 3 and 5 days a week. But it's a place where we all want to be because we all know that the person next to us is holding their weight and they're working just as hard as you, if not harder.
Thank you. Great answer. Great.
If I may, I think one thing she said is very important is the commonality at the senior management team, where everybody understands the role they play, right? I've always seen organizations sort of as a honeycomb, right? You got to be tightly knit together, but you got to know what your end boundary is and what the other person's start boundary is. But the goal and the trust, right? So yeah, that's important.
Thank you, Monica. And that also leads into the next question for you. So in business, of course, we're all about quantifying and being able to measure the impact of anything we do. So how can we measure the impact of the measures they put in place to instill accountability?
Very difficult. I haven't figured that out yet. So one way I think it is to sort of have goals that are measurable. It's easy to say, very hard to do. The second thing that I watch for is how many decisions come to me and how many decisions are getting made at different levels. One of my colleagues is sitting here right in the front row, and we were having this conversation earlier today on an example of a decision that came to me and one of my colleagues, and that decision did not belong with us. Not yet, at least, right? So understanding where decisions are being made is extremely important, but then you also have to understand why decisions are not being made. And try to figure that out, because that's where the culture sort of starts playing the role of a good culture versus not so good culture, where do people believe that they can make a mistake, right? Do people believe that, if I make this decision and it doesn't go well, who's going to take the accountability for it? And if you as a manager, they see every level, right? That when things go bad, it's me. When things go good, it's the person who actually helps succeed. That also allows for that fear to go away and decisions to be made at the level they need to be made. Another thing I would say is that, which we struggle with in our organization, what are some of the key points that we can share with the team to help make that decision, right? So if you're making this decision, consider these 3 things. And if you consider these 3 things, then go for it if you've met that criteria. It's a work in progress, but that's also one way to then say, okay, if I'm giving the sort of the playbook on what's important, why, right? We've all talked about the why it's important to do it. Then I think, as I said, where decision making is happening becomes a tool and a way to measure.
Great answer. If I had one more item. Also, if your company has like an employee survey for morale and that sort of thing, you also can find a measurement in there typically, because a lot of times you can see it from an engagement perspective or empowerment line item in that survey. And so that's another way that you can measure whether or not you're seeing micromanagement across the organization and not even just within your own organization. So I would also look at measurements like that as well.
Yeah, just be ready for the answer after that.
Okay. So one more thing to piggyback off the quantity of the decisions being made. The other thing also to measure is the quality of your decisions that are being made. I think, you're not going to expect fantastic results out the gate, but it's a way to support and challenge your team as they're making those decisions. And over time, the quality of that decision making increasing.
Wonderful answers and discussion. So, Reba, what advice would you offer to emerging leaders and new managers about how they can instill a culture of accountability and ownership within their own teams?
Yeah, I think, one sort of strategy I like to use is really lead by example as a leader. What Monica said in terms of depending on which type of organization you are at a leadership level, it is a honeycomb. But what you can do as a leader is really setting an example. And when you start to set certain frameworks in terms of how you move to accountability, that sort of permeates through your team and increases collaboration just within your team, but also other teams that are interacting with your team. So what I would really, love to, what I really go by is being able to set an example, lead by example with your team, because it's very difficult to get a whole organization to pivot in a certain direction, but you can start somewhere.
It's great. And if anyone has anything else to add.
Yeah, I would like also to add that delegating more and when you're entrusting your employees with tasks, you conveying confidence in their skills and abilities to complete these tasks at the highest level. So this gives them a tool to become the highest themselves.
I would add on, one of the things that I like to make sure that I do as well is set the expectation, especially with your employees, is making sure that they understand how you are as a leader, what your expectations are, but the expectations for their role. Because I think sometimes when we go down that micromanagement path, it's because that's not set and people don't understand and that communication is not grounded. And so we tend to lean in and want to have control over something. But if you set the expectations and then follow up and seek feedback, I think that you'll find that that's less likely that you're wanting to lean into micromanagement.
Yeah, I'll reiterate the value of setting expectations, right? And one additional thing that you can do, I'll especially answer the part for a new manager. If things are working well, right? If your team is successful, if they're delivering stuff successfully, it sort of means that there is accountability. But that's a hypothetical scenario, right? Things will not always work out really well. So when things don't work out well, how often are you seeking information and how often are people coming to you with information is a great way to see how things are going. If you set your expectations right and the stuff did not happen as you had expected, but your team member did the job of coming to you, explaining the problem, I think they feel accountable. There was a reason. Versus if you have to reach out and find out what's going on, there's something missing there. So that's a great way to calibrate the team morale.
So I agree and disagree with you at the same time, right? So I think it's important where you feel the team members feel they can come to you and share, but not for the reasons that if they believe that they have to come to you, because if you don't, next time you're going to start micromanaging them. So that balance sort of is important. I would also say you got to know your team.
You got to know your
right. You got to know your team, right? What works for one of my team members in the way he or I or she or I would communicate may not work with the other person. And the responsibility of knowing your team is yours, not the employees. And that's hard. That takes time. Somebody else said, it takes active management, right? Active management not to micromanage, but active management to know how to manage. And as I said, you got to put in the time as a manager.
Yeah. Great conversation there. Great conversation. So switching a bit from management perspective, we are all leaders, no matter what our role is or our title is. So without having direct authority, this is to Bhavya, without having direct authority, what can someone do to call out micromanagement and
and I'll resolve that behavior in others?
That's a very important question, and I think that's very challenging because if you have direct authority, it's straightforward, right? It's a part of your job. You can talk to the individual and tell them that they're not doing something right. But if you have to do it without having that direct responsibility and authority, it needs to be subtle. I think I'll go back to what Monica has been saying multiple times. You need to understand the reason of why the micromanagement is happening. So if you're seeing someone, let's say a peer or like someone you report to being micromanaged, you need to understand that, like, dig into the reason, figure out why that's happening. Is it because the individual is not performing up to the mark? Maybe sometimes it's needed. It's like micromanagement is the only way to get them up to the mark. Or is it because the manager is over-controlling? They're a new manager. They haven't figured out their way yet. Or is it because just the culture of the company is sort of promoting micromanagement in some sense? And what you can do will differ in each of these scenarios. If you think it is a new individual who's like learning their way up how to be a manager, I think you can be frank. You can go talk to them. You can give them that feedback. Hopefully you can go tell them that, hey, are you open for some constructive feedback? Someone did this to me when I was a new manager. A team member in my team came up to me and said that, Bhavya, is it okay if I tell you something which might sound like a criticism, but I think it will really help you as you grow in your career as a manager? And it was a great conversation. I realized what I was not doing very well. So that could be one approach. But on the other side, if the culture of the company itself is sort of promoting micromanagement, I think it becomes really challenging, and maybe you need to call out, or maybe you need to move away.
I would say the one other thing is if you don't feel comfortable going directly to the person, but there is a feedback system, you can also provide feedback. But I would say if you're going to do it in that manner, make sure that the example is very crisp and that you have tangible things and behaviors that person can relate back to, and a memory of the actual instance so that the behavior can be changed and modified. If you just say you're micromanaging, then it's less likely that they'll be able to know exactly when and what behavior caused you to feel that they were micromanaging.
Absolutely. Here, do we have any other perspective?
I think it's just also important to like find the ally in the room, and like if it's happening to you, it's probably also happening to someone else, whether that's on your team or otherwise. But I think having multiple people, and not to feel like you're ganging up on this person, but to have several examples and real hard evidence and proof, I think is more helpful than anything else. First-time managers are often the most skittish and scared, and that's talking from personal experience there. You want to know what's happening and how you're being perceived because you don't often understand it. Like body language is a big thing that I've been working on. My team knows that. They've really been calling me out for crossing my arms in meetings. It's not that I'm closed off. It's just that I'm focusing, and that tends to be how I do it as I pull my hand out from in between my legs. But it really is important to have multiple people who can kind of back you up and support you in whatever claims and kind of decisions you're making.
Right. And I think it's also that you have to have that relationship already with the person, kind of establish that just mutual trust so that they know that you're coming from a good place. And that you phrase it as just as a suggestion instead of a criticism or anything like that. So it's very important to have that relationship, I think, established with that person before you give suggestions. They're much more likely to listen, of course. Yeah, I want to echo this because we need to keep in mind that all managers have good intentions, and whatever their behavior and whatever their actions are, exactly to echo your point, that we need to understand what is happening behind the scenes and help this person by setting the example, by sharing some examples or success stories to help move away from the behavior. Yes, excellent. So in our last 5 minutes, I want to open up to the panelists, to our speakers, and if there's kind of any closing remarks that you would like to make
about micromanagement, personal example, or just something that, you wish we would have discussed that we hadn't gotten a chance to yet? You have a question?
Another question.
Hi, I'm Aditi Baker, and I lead data science and AI practices. One interesting phenomenon we have seen recently is when there are junior tech leaders and they're coming into leadership and they want to raise the bar of the teams or the departments, and they introduce something like code review when the team is not used to, there was a sense culturally that something like code review, which is often a best practice in many places, starts to feel like micromanagement. So any recommendations on how do you manage that kind of a culture shift? It's a good question, but I'll let somebody else answer first.
I will. I think if something like code review is being like it's feeling like micromanagement, it's probably because before introducing the method, the reasons were not shared because the team does not understand why it's important. And if they think that this is an exercise of rating and evaluating the team members, of course there's going to be like defense, right? They'll act defensive. But if it is an exercise of improving the quality of what the team delivers, if it is an exercise of every single developer learning from the better code that a senior developer is writing or a high performer is writing, and then they would be more open. So my team has done like public code reviews for a really long time. Every single PR goes to every single individual. And I think, and I'll be honest, like when I started when I started as a developer, it was scary. Sending out that PR felt like, oh my God, I'll receive 100 different comments from people and this will be a shame game. And I had that conversation with my manager. It was like, wow, why are 50 people commenting on everything I put out there? And he made me see the point. He made me see the value that is adding. And the next time I was putting out a PR, it was better. I was already incorporating the feedback. So if the team understands the value behind why something is being introduced, they are less likely to feel that this is micromanagement.
And I also would add that creating a safe environment where the failure is allowed and could be embraced, that would help people to alleviate this kind of feeling of being micromanaged, and kind of eliminating the association of the autonomy and accountability from punishment, because we have this kind of association. Accountability is kind of punishment. That would also help to alleviate these issues.
Great question and wonderful answers. I wish that we had more than 45 minutes to talk about this very, very crucial subject. And I want to thank everyone on the panel for providing your incredible insights. I certainly have learned, and I hope that our audience does as well. So feel free after the session to connect with any of us if you have additional questions. And, enjoy your lunch after this. And we really look forward to connecting with you, whether at the conference or on LinkedIn, and staying in touch. This is about women and women growing together. And I think we've done a great job and shown that. And I'm excited for what's to come and to meet more of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.